Good evening, everyone. My name is Keith Williams, and on behalf of the Lancaster Conservancy, welcome to Nature Hour. Lancaster's Conservancy's mission is to provide wild and forested lands and clean waterways for our community forever. We protect the ancestral lands of the Susquehanna, the Conestoga, and Shanks Ferry people, and my hope is that we care for these lands as well as these Native people do. For 50 years, our organization has sought out natural places that are so precious and beautiful that they must be protected. Our stewardship team works to restore these special places by creating trails, planting trees, removing invasives. These preserves are then open for you and I to use to hunt, hike, fish, and birdwatch 365 days a year. Special places like Shanks Ferry, House Rock, Pelham Hills, Kelly's Run, Otter Creek, Climbers Run, Welsh Mountain, and many others are protected forever. We launched Nature Hour with the goal of bringing an assortment of local and regional experts directly to your home with presentations that help us all better understand the work of the Conservancy and the work of our community partners. The format for tonight's lecture is actually two different presentations. We're very lucky tonight to have two presenters. They'll each be about 20 minutes each, so a total of about 40 to 45 minutes of presentation, followed by about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll include your questions as part of our conversation. This is the fourth lecture of our 2023 winter season. Our next Nature Hour will be March 8th on spring ephemeral wildflowers. You can learn more and pre-register for this lecture and many other interpretive events on our website, lancasterconservancy.org, under upcoming events. The Conservancy is blessed with incredible corporate support, and tonight we want to recognize our annual sponsors, who include Clark Associates, Stauffer's of Kissel Hill, Dart Container, Electron Energy, Eurofins, Lakshwama, Penstone, Ritu Associates. And now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's Nature Hour, the state of our rivers and streams, with two very, very dear friends of mine, Ted Evgeniadis and Jeremy Monroe. Ted is our Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper, and he'll take the second part of this. Jeremy's going to kick us off. Jeremy's coming all the way from Corvallis, Oregon today. He's the founder and director of Freshwaters Illustrated, an organization that's dedicated to raising public awareness about the life, study, and conservation of freshwater ecosystems through immersive visual media and stories. Jeremy started Freshwaters Illustrated to help create more immersive imagery and stories that carry the beauty, diversity, and value of freshwater ecosystems. He sees his job as helping to reconnect people to the intricacy, wonder, and needs of rivers, lakes, and wetlands. Jeremy's background is in aquatic ecology, which helps him access stories that celebrate the vibrance and value of freshwater life. Jeremy has degrees in aquatic ecology and fisheries biology from Colorado State University. Jeremy, thanks for coming to us all the way from the Pacific Northwest today.
Thanks for having me, Keith. Thanks for that nice introduction. Can you see my screen up now?
Yep, looks great.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks to the Conservancy for inviting me and to Ted for co-presenting tonight and sharing this night with me. So yeah, I just want to start with a little bit of that background that Keith mentioned. So I come to this, I came to my living through a background in aquatic ecology, fish biology, and this is the organization that I run, Freshwaters Illustrated. And I want to give a shout out to Dave Harasimchuk. A lot of the beautiful images that you'll see in this presentation are his, and to our team at Freshwaters Illustrated that does a lot to produce the films and educational content that we work on. But we have this mission, like Keith mentioned, of raising public awareness of freshwater life, science, and conservation. So what does that look like? Our best days look like this. We're underwater in a beautiful stream somewhere, or lake or wetland. And we're with these incredible animals, learning about them, learning what they do, and trying to capture their behaviors, their habitats, and their lives. And sometimes that looks like this. We're capturing the voices and the work of conservation professionals, biologists, people who work in our lakes, rivers, and wetlands. And some of the funnest moments we have are when we're out on the streams and we're able to show people what we're seeing. We may be in the water snorkeling, and we always look interesting or confusing. And so we're able to show, especially with the cameras that we have nowadays, imagery of these animals that we can see. These are some of our favorite moments that we have. Like Keith mentioned, I'm coming to you from Oregon, and these are some of my neighbors that we have here. And I'm sure everyone will recognize these as salmon. These are Chinook salmon. The theme of tonight's talk, the state of our rivers and streams, for me, it kind of brings up, how we take care of water, how we take care of clean water. A lot of times we talk about drinkable, fishable, swimmable water. That's what we're protecting. I've spent enough time with fish to think of that as breathable water too. These animals have gills. They need to breathe that water just like we breathe air. And salmon need to do that over a big life that covers a lot of ground. Of course, the migrations of salmon, this is a chum salmon, are iconic, and they need a whole river system to be clean enough, to breathable enough, a food web to support their lives through 2 migrations, both out and back to the rivers where they were born, and meanwhile spending time in a bay or an ocean. These are coho salmon. So I love to bring people into the worlds of these fish that they know, and hopefully a little bit deeper. These are pink salmon. And there are more salmon, and salmon are just amazing in how they use entire watersheds, and they really teach us how much water one fish and one life of a fish needs. Right alongside those salmon, here on the West Coast, we have these fish. These are some of the world's oldest, most ancient fish. These are Pacific lamprey, and they're akin to the lamprey that you have in your Atlantic drainages, which are sea lamprey. So just like a salmon, these lamprey, just like your sea lamprey, migrate from inland rivers all the way out to the ocean. When they're out there, they act as a parasite on larger fish, and so that's how they grow from what looks like a little worm all the way up to a fish that could be almost as long as your arm. And of course, they have that amazing mouth with no fins. Some people don't even think of these animals as fish, but they are in fact the one of the most ancient fish, and they've been doing what they do for a long time. The larva of that Pacific lamprey that you just saw looks like this. It looks like a little worm, and it lives in sediments. And so it not only lives underwater, it lives sort of underground in a river. And that, of course, is a place where a lot of our contaminants and pollutants sometimes settle in those areas. And these animals aren't doing well right now. Pacific lamprey have been petitioned for listing and under the Endangered Species Act. And we're really kind of trying to catch up to what's happening with these animals. But they're an example of a fish that without imagery, without having a contact with these animals, it's hard to know. It's easy maybe to forget that they're there and that they're dealing with, in some cases, how we're treating our rivers and the landscapes around them. These are another recognizable fish. These are trout, cutthroat trout from the Rocky Mountains. Trout are one of these animals I feel like a lot of people associate with a clean stream, clear headwater habitat. These are bull trout. These are amazing fish. We love to snorkel with them, but they're in the clearest, coldest water that we have in the Northwest. That's usually associated with a big spring that comes out of the ground. But these fish, many trout are, that they are really sensitive to water quality. These are brook trout, of course, that you have in Pennsylvania. This is, I believe, Pennsylvania's state fish. And trout are often these animals that need really cold water. That colder water holds more oxygen, and again is more breathable. And so really over the last couple centuries, we've lost trout habitat, and we stand to lose more as our rivers potentially warm up, and we're dealing with less stream flows, potentially less groundwater supplies in certain areas. And so these fish we're really thinking about as we're going into the future, trying to protect the places that they need. We work in the desert. We work on, almost sounds like an oxymoron, but we love to work with desert fish that not only are running out of water, we're certainly not making any more water, but in the desert Southwest, places like the Colorado River Basin, these fish are really fighting with the way that humans have inhabit landscapes, and that just what a thirsty culture that we have, and a lot of the communities that we have in the desert Southwest that are very water intensive communities. And so these fish, even before we talk about the quality of the water, are really fighting for the amount of habitat that they have available. That was a bluehead sucker you just saw. These are humpback chubs from Colorado River Grand Canyon ecosystem. Here are some round-tailed chubs. Many of these desert fishes are associated with springs, so groundwater. So not only does that relate to how much snowpack we have to recharge groundwater, but also even sometimes mining activities, or the way we're managing those forests on the uplands to capture snow. And so not only the quantity of that groundwater that's coming out, but the quality of it is affected by these human activities. And so these fish are really kind of a really stark icon of what hangs in the balance with the decisions we make on our landscapes. And this is another springfish from Nevada that lives in a habitat that might not be much bigger than, your city park, or maybe a lot smaller. And that's the only place that it lives. And that water that it's dependent on needs to be healthy enough. It needs to be able to support the food web that supports this fish. Kind of moving across the continent, back to your area, these are long-nosed gars. That springfish was maybe as long as your finger. Well, these fish some of them are as long as your leg. And they're amazing animals. Again, they make big migrations. They need to go sometimes from a big river or lake habitat, and they need to move to a smaller tributary that has cleaner gravels, cleaner water, and that's where they'll do their spawning and where their young will rear. A little further south of you in southern Appalachia, that's North America's hotspot of fish diversity, and that's where you see images and behaviors like this: beautiful, colorful fishes doing amazing things like building nests of clean gravel and all turning on spawning colors that could be bright blues, reds, yellows. And this is a place where, in my lifetime, for example, things like the Clean Water Act, I inherited that was passed before I was even born. But in the work that we do and in my life, we've gotten to see places where that one law and the people who are looking out for it have gained opportunities to take care of these fish. So for example, these tangerine darters, we've been able to see these fish be reintroduced to habitats where they weren't, because of, say, a pulp mill effluent made that poisoned a river or killed a river. Well, a couple decades later, after cleanup, you have a river that has recovered enough to put these beautiful fish back into and let them back into part of their home range and part of their home. Moving from the fish world to the amphibian world, I think of amphibians of these animals that really connect water to landscapes, and of course their life cycle connects those two habitats. That was a Pacific giant salamander, one of my neighbors, and this is of course one of your neighbors, the eastern hellbender. This, I believe, is Pennsylvania's state amphibian, and it might be the only state that has the hellbender as its state amphibian, which I think is a bragging right. These are amazing animals. Again, they need clear water. They need really clean substrates to live in. They have burrows under rocks and nest rocks, and all of their prey rely on these clean stream beds. So this is a neat animal, and then you can get into animals like these western toads that might use a wetland habitat or a lake habitat. And this is an adult of breeding. This is a group of breeding adult western toads. And of course, they have this amazing life cycle where a few weeks after that event, you'll see a bunch of tadpoles starting to gather. And then a couple weeks later, you might start to see these tadpoles that almost look like toads that will start to emerge onto land again. So just an amazing life cycle that connects water and land. And right now, some of you are probably hearing these wood frogs start to gather and congregate in wetlands and make a whole lot of ruckus while they're doing their breeding behaviors. And that's something I hope within the coming days, I'll be with you to capture this, and also some of the salamander breeding that happens this time of year as part of one of the projects that we're working on in eastern Pennsylvania. Moving from that amphibian world into the invertebrate world, of course, everybody loves crayfish. These are the crayfish that are near me. They're called signal crayfish. They look like little lobsters. And I feel like crayfish are one of these nice, fun kind of gateway creatures that draw us into the water, and we'd love to watch them, do their industrious things underwater. They're fun to snorkel with. And, a lot of us have, caught crayfish and frogs as kids. Mussels, North America is a global hotspot of freshwater mussel diversity, and mussels may not be an animal that we think of that much, but Here they are, they're amazing. Just by being on the bottom of the stream, breathing and eating, they're actually cleaning water. Um, they take in those particles out of the current and they bind those up, and they actually produce pure, cleaner water just by pumping water through their bodies, breathing and eating. And of course, mussels have an amazing a behavior that I don't have too much time to tell you about, but suffice to say, they trick fish into carrying their babies. And that's what you're seeing here, that really neat behavior that all North American native freshwater mussels do. And mussels are one of the most imperiled groups of organisms on the planet. So if that's an indication of the state of our waters, it's a little bit worrisome. And most of that mussel diversity is in your backyard, Eastern North America. And so imagine this scene. This is just not something we see as much anymore. This is a whole bed of Western pearl shell mussels. And we're really losing this kind of abundance of mussels. We've lost a lot of it. And these are animals that can't get out of the way of pollution. And so they can be some of the first ones to go when we pollute or poison rivers, or when we have severe water quality impacts. And to add insult to injury, once we lose these guys, we actually lose one of the mechanisms that we have to cleanse water. And that's what mussels do by their very nature. Here's another neat organism that's in that filter feeding group. These are freshwater shrimp, a teid shrimp. These are in tropical and subtropical streams. So for North America, a lot of these are in the Caribbean. They can be in islands like Puerto Rico. These shrimp are actually from Hawaii, in the Hawaiian Islands. But you can see they have those really kind of flamboyant filters that they use to capture food out of the water. And again, they're water cleaners. We get into the insect world. This is a world that I feel lucky to have gotten to sort of immersed in, and this is where I really got my love for photography, was exploring this world. These are caddisfly larvae. They spin silk. They can use that silk to build nets, cases, which you can see here, of little gravel pebbles that protect them from that fish that might otherwise eat them. These guys are nice and safe. This is a local stream where you can see how many of these caddisflies are all over the bedrock. And they're really performing a service here. They're cleaning the stream bed. They're grazers. They're cleaning the algae off that stream bed. So imagine what that stream bed might look like without those animals there doing that work. It would be a lot more overgrown with algae. So these are amazing animals. And they're also big parts of food webs. And they also have an amazing life cycle. So here's a mayfly nymph that, like a lot of these aquatic insects, and just like this dragonfly nymph here, get to a point in their aquatic life cycle where they then come to the surface. They climb out, they swim up to the water surface, and then they do an amazing transformation. In this case, climbing out of that nymphal skin, stretching out those wings, and getting ready for an adult life cycle where, in a dragonfly's case, they may live for months, going around being a predator. For mayflies, for example, won't eat at all, but all of them will use that part of their life cycle to breed and return to the water. And, I'm always jealous because for me, I would love to have gills or wings. And, these aquatic insects get to have both of those things in one lifetime. That's pretty amazing. So that was just kind of a tour of some of the things that we love. The things that we're lucky to study and pursue and capture imagery of, and then share that imagery and put it in the stories and films. And so we're in the water with these animals. A lot of times, again, we're thinking about what is the state of the water. We need clear water, as you can see. We need water to be clear of sediment, not too murky, not too bloomed with algae or nutrients. And so we're looking for clear water, and a lot of times we're really in tune to the places where clear water is, and that really means places that are well taken care of. A lot of us could think about our local river, and it might not be any day of the year that we would think to put our face or maybe even our foot in that water. There may be certain times where we'd feel safe to do that. There could be some waters where you would never feel safe to do that. So we think about that. Most of the time we're really tracking clear water, and we're in waters that make us feel wonderful and are great ecosystems. We've also been in waters that have made us sick and made us worried about, how we're taking care of waters. And we're not the only ones that are asking those questions or are interested in taking care of fresh waters. It's been a wonderful to be again, another thing I feel like I've inherited is a movement of water stewards, not just since the Clean Water Act, but even before, of people who are interested in looking out for the quality of that water. This is one of your neighbors not far away in Eastern Pennsylvania, part of a watershed association. Just a volunteer who makes a point to go keep track of the water quality in a local Hay Creek tributary to the Schuylkill River. And this is something you see across the country, whether it's a watershed association, a land trust, river keepers and bay keepers, and even local municipalities are more and more, and communities more and more looking out for their water quality. And in many cases, in your part of the world, that we're seeing something really neat, where a lot of automation in this process of this is something developed by the Stroud Water Research Center, something called a mayfly logger that has a probe in the creek that then sends out real-time data on any number of parameters. Here you're looking at a conductivity reading that's being real-time read and viewed on an app on a cell phone. So that's pretty neat to see, because that's really what this is all about, is the quality of this water and how well are we able to track it? What questions can we ask? What things do we need to be looking for? And what ways do we need to improve it? What actions can be taken? And in many cases, it is as simple as, planting a tree, reestablishing native vegetation along creeks and rivers. Like this one again in Eastern Pennsylvania, and hopefully a lot of trees, because you want a creek that looks like this to someday look like this. You want that big forest canopy that's not just going to cool the water, it's going to filter hill slopes and runoff that may come into that stream. It's going to feed that stream with the nutrients that come from leaves, and it's going to limit a lot of that algae growth that happens with the lack of that canopy. So all those things are good things, and a lot of the restoration that we see in our that are being done by those watershed councils, our land trusts, like the Lancaster Conservancy, like Riverkeeper. So a lot of those projects do involve looking at our watershed, seeing how forested it is. Because when we think of that water quality, this may be me selfishly, but this is the thing that I want us, this is the thing that I do, and this is the thing I want to see more people do. And I've been lucky to see, it's why I hang out with people like, this is a man named Casper Cox, who actually guides river snorkeling in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, and really opens people's eyes to these beautiful ecosystems that can exist when we take care of a creek, a river, a wetland. And it's pretty amazing to see how somebody's perspective changes and how their behavior might change once they've had an experience like this. So I'm a true believer in getting into the water, finding those safe waters to understand and embrace what's all this life that's in the water, and then learn. That's a gateway to learning what is healthy in your watershed, where are places where we need to keep working to make our rivers and creeks healthier. And this was a neat opportunity I had to see just this last year in French Creek, a tributary to the Schuylkill, where Keith Williams, who made the introduction with the Lancaster Conservancy, was bringing a whole school group out to one of their local creeks that not one of them had snorkeled in, and every one of them had to be just sort of pried from the river that day because they had a wonderful time and they didn't want to get out. And this is what we see every time. So I tend to think that's what this is about. It's about the future. Part of my work is showing people just the beauty of these ecosystems, how much diversity, how much life, how much of an ecosystem is in a wetland, a river, or a creek. But none of this really would be here. I mean, all of this is hangs in the balance of how we live along these streams. And like I said, I feel like I've had the benefit of inheriting the work that others did to bring about something as strong as the Clean Water Act. I've also been a beneficiary of all those groups, all those people who work to take care of rivers, creeks, watersheds, their own local communities in a variety of ways. And certainly river keepers have been one of the strongest of that. And I hope that's a good segue into Ted's talk, who will kind of bring us into that world. But hopefully I'm good on time here. I wasn't, I may have gone a tad over, but I think I'll stop there, and remind me if I need to stop my share.
Yeah, you're good, Jeremy. And
Okay.
Ted will just take it from there. So thanks for that amazing perspective, that national perspective, even international in a way, with things from beyond the conterminous US and the underwater perspective. And I almost forgot all about that day in French Creek. That was pretty great, having all those kids face down in the river. Ted's going to take it from there, and he's going to give us a little bit of a different perspective. Ted works more regionally. Ted Evgeniadis is the Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper, and in his role, he takes on polluters. As the head of the Susquehanna Riverkeeper Association, they actively investigate reports of pollution. His vigilance has resulted in multiple lawsuits that were successfully won against businesses that violated state and federal clean water laws that include the largest settlement against a coal-fired power plant in the history of the state. Ted is a bulldog when it comes to protecting Lower Susquehanna, and we're grateful to have him, and we're grateful to have him here tonight. Thanks for being here, Ted.
Thank you, Keith. Keith's a good friend of mine. I appreciate it. And Jeremy, thank you so much. I have a lifelong passion for what lives beneath the surface of our waters. So I appreciate all that you do, and as well as you, Keith. So one disclaimer before I start is I have a very bad habit. I like to pack in a whole bunch of information into very short sessions. So bear with me, hold on to your seats. If you have questions, let me know at the end. So we're going to dive into a couple different things here. Our organization is all about advocacy, policy, enforcement, stewardship, and education. So we're going to go into a little bit about the Clean Water Act, the history of Waterkeeper Alliance, our organization, a couple issues that we're working on, some updates on our programs, and some of our event successes. All right, so Waterkeeper Alliance is a worldwide organization. We have over 350 waterkeepers protecting over 2.8 million square miles of water all around the world on 6 continents. And I'm gonna give you a brief history about it, and it all started on the Hudson River. Hudson River was the laughing stock of this country as far as, people weren't swimming in it, they weren't recreating on it. It was so polluted. You had companies and industries like the oil and gas, you had textiles, railroads, wastewater treatment plants, power plants, and this was pre-1972 Clean Water Act. This was back in the 1960s. There was, recreational fishermen. They needed this water. They provided a benefit. They're out there, collecting fish and shellfish, and they couldn't do it anymore. The river was so polluted. They had grand ideas of stuffing mattresses up the pipes of these railroad companies. They wanted, take dynamite and put it on rafts and then throw it into the intakes of these power plants that were killing fish day in and day out because of their thermal pollution coming out of these plants. So these guys banded together. They got with a guy, his name was Bob Boyle, and they started going after polluters because Bob brought up that there was this Harbors and Rivers Act, and that allowed them to essentially sue polluters in court. And from the court winnings that they got stipends to get a boat. And then in 1983, they established the Hudson Riverkeeper. And from then, we've seen other riverkeepers in that period of time, like the Delaware Riverkeeper, San Francisco Baykeeper, New Jersey, New York Harbor Keeper, and many others. And so fast forwarding into the 90s, that's when Waterkeeper Alliance was born, after a lot of these other waterkeeper groups essentially emulated what Hudson did. So a waterkeeper is, we are the watchdogs. We are somebody who is paying attention to, different pollution sources and making sure that regulatory agencies are doing their job, and we're reviewing the permits that they're putting out. So we serve as the eyes and ears to make sure pollution is kept in check. And when it's not, and if there's violations, and folks aren't following the law, we are here to make sure that they do that and that they do follow the law. So again, going into it, we stop pollution in the river and its creeks by using monitoring data and pollution controls, excuse me. We insist that laws are enforced by regulators and enforce laws when our state and federal agencies are unable to do their job. We use science, we build coalitions, we follow reviews to change laws that improve water quality. We educate lawmakers and the public on the issues the river faces. And we also organize stewardship activities like cleanups. And we have a lot of citizen scientist type of monitoring programs, which we'll get into a little bit later. So this map here, this is our territory. So as you can see, from Sealands Grove to the Chesapeake Bay and the entire Juniata watershed. So looking east to west, Lancaster to Bedford County, it's about 8,500 square miles of jurisdictional territory we have to monitor and patrol for pollution. So we have a lot of different issues facing the Susquehanna River and all of its tributaries. We have a lot of different sources of those pollutions, source of that pollution. Obviously, ag runoff. I'm sure a lot of folks know about, animal manure, pesticides, fertilizers, and all that stuff. There's just runs off, farm fields and croplands and right into our water body. Stormwater runoff. With climate change, we continue to see more frequent and intense storms. So with that is going to come exacerbated amounts of stormwater runoff into our creeks, which carries with it a slew of pollutants, that wind up in our waterways. Development, land use, same deal. We try to keep a check and an eye on development issues and land use issues, and make sure people are following the law there. Point source dischargers, obviously looking at industries, wastewater treatment plants, industrial facilities. We're actively involved with cases on really a lot of these: power plants, paper mills, food processors, slaughterhouses, concentrated animal feeding operations, landfills, and a whole lot more. So we do have a set of laws, right? We have laws that are on the books. We have state laws, we have federal laws. I'm going to spend a little bit of time tonight going over the Clean Water Act. We're going to do a little brief dive 101 session of the Clean Water Act, but we do have these other state laws too. We also have an environmental rights amendment. We as Pennsylvanians have the protection essentially. We, under Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania State Constitution, it says that we have the right to clean air, clean water, and basically a healthy environment. It is our right. The water is a public resource. It is everybody's right to recreate on it, to be able to drink from it, to swim in it, to fish in it. And it is our right to do so. And we have to make sure that we withhold that right, that we have that right. And when that right's taken away from us, we have to make sure that we do the best we can to keep polluters in check so we get that right back. I'm sure there's a lot of examples that you all are aware of. And we'll get into a couple here in a few. All right, so Clean Water Act 101. It was passed in 1972. Many of you may have been around at that time. I sure wasn't. I was born in 85, so I was not there at that point in time. But you know what? I kind of wish I was. We had a Congress back then that is much different than the Congress we have today. We had people that actually cared. And not saying that not everyone cares, but we had a United States Congress that saw that water and pollution was a national security issue and a concern for public health across the entire country. Many of you may know that the Cuyahoga River, it caught on fire, not once, not twice, but multiple times. And that kind of sparked Congress to take action. And again, it was a direct response to the public outcry over this pollution. And it also established permitting, which we'll get into a little bit that, and citizen suits. There's provisions there. So the Clean Water Act has many statutes, many provisions. We can spend hours and hours talking about it, dissecting it. We're just going to take a brief dive into it right now. So basically, there is a goal to eliminate pollution, not reduce, not minimize, but eliminate pollution from our nation's waters. And originally, we were supposed to do that in 1985. Obviously, we still have sources of pollution left unchecked, but the Clean Water Act has done tremendous work all around the country, especially around the wastewater industry. So it's set up conditions for permitting, and Section 301, it makes it unlawful to discharge any kind of pollutant into waters of the United States unless you have a permit. So there has to be an addition. There has to be a pollutant and there has to be a point source, and it has to go into waters of the United States. The term pollutant, this is very important. If you want to screenshot this page, go ahead. These are the terms of what a pollutant is. I'm not going to go through them for the sake of time. Screenshot it, take a picture of it. This is what the Clean Water Act dictates what pollution is, or what a pollutant is. And a point source, again, if you want to take a picture of this, feel free. This defines what a point source is. So I want to go through just a really quick exercise. It's much better if you do it in person, but if anyone wants to use your chat function, say yes, give me a thumbs up, give me a smiley face, whatever you want to do. Take a look at this picture, right? You got the pipe. There's this water coming out. So what do we have? Is there an addition? I think we can say there's an addition here, right? There's water flowing out of this pipe. Is there a pollutant? Well, if you look at that water, whatever that effluent is, doesn't look good, right? You could probably say there's a pollutant there for sure. Is there a point source? Well, we got the pipe. Obviously, there's a point source. How about waters of the United States? Let's just pretend this is waters of the United States, which it most likely is. Is there a violation? Well, you might say if they don't have a permit, Ted, there probably is. And if they do have a permit, I'm sure there's problems here. I mean, you can see the color of this water. Going to this one, this is another one here. So spot the violation. You have this plane, you have these bombs that are coming down. Addition, pollutant, point source, waters of the United States. Is there an addition? Yeah, there's bombs dropping. Pollutant, munitions. Munitions is listed as a pollutant. How about the point source? The plane looks like a good point source. Waters of the United States, you may say, well, Ted, that's an island, it might be in the middle of the ocean. So the territorial seas, is within 3 miles. Let's pretend this is the island of Viejas, where the United States Navy used to drop bombs, which was later found out they needed a Clean Water Act permit. So we did learn some lessons. Many people don't understand. Many people don't know that water pollution is still a very serious issue and a problem in the United States, especially for environmental justice communities and other vulnerable communities. We have to stay vigilant. We have to make sure that corporate interests do not take over our rights for clean water, which we see happen all of the time. And that's one of our, focuses, is that we want to make sure that no one just runs over and, puts up a dam or puts up a warehouse or, is violating their permit. And we do our job here is to make sure that doesn't happen. Again, once a waterway is impaired, it's extremely difficult to return it back to its previous state. There's designated uses that are within the Clean Water Act. There's a waterway. Is it healthy enough to support aquatic life? Is it healthy enough to support recreational uses? Is it healthy enough to support drinking? And all these other things. So we have, especially Lancaster County, I'm sure we all have seen the statistics. We have like 85% of our county's waters are impaired to some designated use, which is very alarming. And there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to correct that and restore those waterways. These are some of the issues that we're working on. There's a bunch there. A lot of these issues are point source issues that we're working on, but again, we are tackling other issues around stormwater runoff and some plastics and smallmouth bass and the diseases they're facing. So moving on to an issue we're working on, some of you may know, there's a landfill in York County. It's the modern landfill. They've been around for since the 60s. It's a Superfund site. They've already polluted water from when their landfill was unlined. Private wells were contaminated. People got sick and people died. I mean, that's legitimate truth of what happened back in the 1980s. It is still a Superfund site. The landfill that they're using now is lined, but they have leachate or liquor that's coming from this landfill and it's being discharged into Kreutz Creek, which eventually flows into the Susquehanna. So what we've been doing over the last about 3 years is we've been monitoring the creek for pollutants. Pollutants that are listed in their permit, which they're violating, and then additional pollutants like PFAS, forever chemicals, which we detected in their wastewater stream. So we just filed a federal lawsuit against Republic Services, who owns and operates this landfill, and obviously we were filing notice of intent to sue and a lawsuit because of these violations, continuous ongoing violations year after year. They don't have the technology in place to treat it. And right now we're obviously, we just filed that lawsuit. So we're just beginning the process here. A good example of a great success we've had is a polluting slaughterhouse in Lebanon County, Keystone Protein Plant. They were violating their permit for years and years and years, over a decade. This was an area where the DEP stepped in. They filed an administrative order against this company. And with that came a timeline for this company to correct their violations. 2012, they initiated that consent agreement. And 4 years later, they were supposed to upgrade their wastewater treatment plant. They never did. They entered into a second agreement with the state 4 years later, or a couple years later. Again, nothing's going on. They have no plans on fixing it. We file a lawsuit, they fix it, and then we get them to pay significant penalties. So what happens is when these polluters are violating the law, they're also not only just harming our environment and water quality, but they're also receiving an economic benefit. So if a polluter is not going to upgrade their wastewater treatment plant and the state is slapping them on the wrist for $100 or $200 a day in violations, that's not doing good enough. They are making money hand over fist. So in this case, we settled on $1 million. That $1 million went to stream restoration projects in Lebanon, Lancaster, and York counties. And also some money went towards restoration monitoring with the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring at Dickinson College. So we do have some new programs. We have a microplastics monitoring program. We just started that last year. We have a pilot team right now. They're out on 10 different creeks in York County. We're looking to expand this. We're looking to get some funding, and we're looking to bring this into Lancaster County. So be aware of this. If anyone has any interest in this type of monitoring, this type of citizen scientist, kind of programming, feel free to reach out to us, go to our website, and sign up for our newsletters. We'll have more information as we begin to expand. Water watchdogs, this kind of stemmed from our work in Harrisburg. Some of you may know we've been monitoring water quality in Harrisburg and the bacteria levels there. The idea of water watchdogs kind of came from that. So we did get grant funding last year to implement this program. It is going to be a volunteer-led bacteria monitoring program that we're going to focus on popular public access points on not just the Susquehanna, but other tributaries like the Conestoga. And we're going to be able to have people out there on a weekly basis during the recreational season, May through September, taking water samples, typically right before the weekend. So, and within our lab, we're able to test within an 18-hour time frame. So we're going to be able to turn around results within 24 hours. We're going to be able to inform the public about, certain sites, if it's safe to swim, if it's safe to recreate or not, based on bacteria levels. So that's going to be really eye-opening, and hopefully we get green marks all across the board. But it's going to be a really important tool for people to use when they're going to want to go out and paddle or wet wade or fish. It's going to be really nice. And right now, no one's doing that. So we're looking to get some volunteers in place for that, and we're going to be rolling that out here in the next couple of months. Some good successes we had. Last year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. Like I said before, we've come a very long way. We have much to do. And in last year, we set a goal to remove 50,000 pounds of trash, single-use plastics, tires from our waterways. We did that. We had some really awesome partners that were involved. And at the end of the day, last year, we removed a little bit over 56,000 pounds of trash from the waterways. Waterways in Lancaster and York. And it was just a tremendous success by hundreds of volunteers. We have this really cool event. We now having the 5th annual event, the Dam Bridge Challenge. We bring paddlers together to recreate on the Susquehanna, to see what it's all about. We're bringing in people from all different kinds of states to see the Susquehanna. We have a majestic, beautiful, ancient river that needs to be explored. And this is an opportunity that we like to give and have people come up to see this river. So, with that, I might have one more minute. What I always like to tell people, and I start like how I started, like 20 minutes just flew by, and I could go on and on, but we have our federal agencies, our state agencies, they have an obligation to protect our water. When they fail to do so, again, it's water keepers that step in to fight for everyone's right to clean water. And that's what we do. I mean, if you go to any water keeper across the world, it's the same mission. It's to stop pollution and hold polluters accountable. We do the best we can. For us, we have a very, very large territory. We have 8,500 square miles. You got me. We have a few staff that are doing excellent work, but we need a lot more hands on deck. We need a lot more resources. We need a lot more staff because we just have so many different issues. And I literally scratched the surface tonight. So I would urge you to check out our website, check out our social media pages, contact me directly. My phone number, my email's on there. If you have questions after this, reach out. I have no problem, meeting, texting, calling. We have to talk about these issues more and more and more. We are as strong as, it's a numbers game. As more people are aware, the stronger we are as a force and as a coalition to stop pollution. And again, I'll leave with this. It's up on the screen. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're member supported. We rely on our members. They're the lifeblood of this organization. If you are capable of giving a donation, we really are promoting monthly donations, sustaining membership, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you can afford, to assist us in our pursuit and our mission in improving and protecting the ecological health of the Susquehanna River and all of its tributaries. So with that, I appreciate everyone tonight. Thanks for joining. Keith, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. And, thanks for all your work protecting the river. And, we need that watchdog to make sure that the polluters are held accountable. And so, Jeremy, if you can pop back on again, we've got a couple of questions that came in during the presentations. And Jeremy, I also wanted to thank you, right? So you're doing equally important work for river protection, but just coming at it from a different angle. That awareness piece is so critically important. I've experienced that firsthand. In fact, it was your first movie that inspired me to start snorkeling, 15 or 20 years ago, right? When I first saw river webs, that's what made me ask the question, what does it look like under the rivers here in my part of the world? And I never turned back. That's become a lifelong passion. So, the work that you're doing, Jeremy, certainly has significant influence by showing people the beauty and the diversity and the abundance of our freshwater life. But then, Ted, we need that awareness to get legs and to take action. And that's where you come in, right? We had a question, two questions. One was about PFAS. Ted, you mentioned that group of chemicals. Can you say more about what those PFAS chemicals are and why they're negative actors?
Per and polyfluorinated alkyl compounds. They are in literally so many things, everything from, textiles to outerwear, clothing, wax that you might put on a surfboard, food wrappers, food containers, firefighting foam. These were compounds that were introduced a very, very long time ago, and they are pervasive in the environment. They don't break down. They bioaccumulate. They are in all of us, from everything we've eaten, from the things that have touched our bodies. And what we're seeing is that it's in land applications, sewage sludge that's, being turned into, essentially fertilizers for our crops. It's in that. We're seeing it out of this landfill in astronomical numbers. We were part of a project with over 100 water keepers across the country. We had the highest results coming out of this landfill in your county. So again, it's going to, obviously, as far as the effects go, it's linked to certain cancers. It's linked to thyroid issues, and many other different health impacts. And researchers are obviously studying it a lot more. We do have now drinking water standards for the state. They're not the best. They're nowhere near what other states have for drinking water standards. At least Pennsylvania made a step. I'll give them that. But again, not the best. EPA has regulations that they're coming out. Waterkeeper Alliance is doing a very good job now with keeping the pressure on EPA so that we can see more regulations come out, so we can see regulations for industrial applications and industrial discharges. Right now, we don't have that. I think we're going to see a case out of our suit against the landfill. We're going to hopefully see permit limits for PFAS in their new permit. And we're hopefully going to have, this site be a model for how we can control industrial pollution that contains PFAS, which there are a lot of different streams of it.
Yeah. And so, how can folks check on the quality of their rivers and streams? Is there an online resource that says whether there's a pollution problem in the rivers and streams?
So we do have a lot of monitoring data. And just to go back, there was a lot of groups back in the early 2000s did a lot for water quality monitoring. Obviously with, administrations that have changed over years, funding has been an issue for a lot of these groups. There's not as much monitoring as there once was. So what we did a couple years back was we reintroduced it between us, Middle Susquehanna Riverkeeper, and Alarm out of Dickinson. Just in our program here in Lower Susquehanna, there's over 100 volunteers monitoring over 50 sites. That information is available on the Chesapeake Data Explorer. So if you look at the Chesapeake Data Explorer, you're going to be able to see water quality monitoring data for different sites all around Pennsylvania, Maryland, and other Bay states.
Cool. And then how can somebody get involved with those programs?
So for us, we are kind of in a phase with Stream Team, which is our program where we're monitoring for temperature, conductivity, nitrates, and pH. We will be looking for more volunteers and citizen scientists here shortly. That's the one program we have directly for water quality monitoring. But for the Water Watchdogs program, again, we're going to be looking to build out that program here in the next couple months. So we will need some people to help out with that, and that's going to be bacteria monitoring, which is pretty cool, and the way we do the analysis and all that.
Yeah, great. So the idea for this nature hour actually came from lunch that I had with Jeremy back a couple months ago when he was here in the East doing getting some more footage and working on a project on the eastern Pennsylvania French Creek. We were having a conversation about how it's kind of disheartening working in conservation, especially freshwater biology conservation right now, because there's a lot of negative stories out there. And as our conversation rolled on, it got me thinking about when I was a kid. I was born pre-Clean Water Act, thank you. And I remember seeing raw sewage in creeks on a regular basis. I remember seeing gas and oil slicks on the surface of streams on a regular basis, right? And we don't have that anymore. So, my ecological baseline, right? That's that idea of shifting baselines is really one of a really impaired stream. And so what we have now is certainly not healthy, but from my memory, it's a whole lot better than what it was, right? So I'm wondering if Jeremy and Ted both, but if you guys, and Jeremy certainly from like a nationwide perspective, Ted from more of the Lower Susquehanna region, if you could comment on trends that you're seeing, right?
Yeah. So, in some of our stories, and certainly in the East, one of the heartening things is like, yeah, it's that long view that might not be in my lifetime, but that if I kind of, open up some old books with black and white images and see completely deforested Appalachian landscapes, and you see the creek running through the bottom of that, and even though it's black and white, you know that color is not something you would want to go swimming in or snorkeling in, and you're almost shocked at, well, how could anything have sort of gotten through that sort of blast, and whatever that sediment was. And of course there's legacy mining, some of that we're still living with, but just the when I look at in the East, I do see a lot of basically a general pattern of reforestation of from some of the heavy huge scale logging, and we saw that a lot in southern Appalachians for sure. And I know I've seen it in New England as well. So that is a heartening piece where we're letting a lot more forests grow into sort of mature, state. We can think of these forests as still, they're not the old growth forests that were there, several hundred years ago, but they're starting to be nice and lush and thick in a lot of places. So when you think of that rainwater runoff that Ted was talking about and just those flushes, and then you think of our climate, like, we are dealing with what seem like a lot more intense storms, bringing a lot more rain. Those forests are going to do a lot for us, and hopefully we don't take those for granted, and we continue to protect those, and we continue to reforest those places that we need to bring back into that protected watershed state. So I see that, and that's kind of a heartening trend. And then I see a lot of, just because of the work of Ted and many others, really not just saying, well, we have the laws, we've got to protect the laws and enforce these laws, that in the last, 30 and 40 years, we've just seen a lot of cities clean up. Like out here in the West, Portland just got its combined sewage overflow, which is a common big city problem. How do you keep your sewage from going into the river when you get too much rain? They got a pretty good system in place, just only, I suppose that was 10 or 15 years ago now. But so that's a heartening piece. What I worry about is the, especially here in the West, our kind of diminishing water resources, our shorter winters, the more people that we want to pack in places that don't have much water. And I do worry, like Ted said, we're still seeing what these persistent chemicals, in a lot of our water treatment infrastructure in our cities was made not to treat what we're putting through our houses and through through our communities now, and even in your own household, whether that's a pharmaceutical or a cleaning product that could have one of these compounds that can persist in the ecosystem for a long time, can have sort of hormonal effects on organisms. Those are things we know enough about to be really worried and concerned, and is why we're glad to have, we can't have enough people out studying what these impacts are. So those are things I look at that kind of temper my optimism. Like, wow, we've still got some big challenges ahead, and I know those are the challenges that, of course, Ted just reminded us how focused our river keepers are on, and of course your agency or your organization, Keith, the Lancaster Conservancy, doing its work by saying it's these landscapes and the waters that they feed. If we can put those into a conservation mission, we can certainly be part of the solution there. So I see a lot of sides of the coin. A lot of our storytelling, has given us some reason for hope. I'll say that.
Yeah, and we have some success stories, right? So going all the way back to, the bald eagle, right? And the reason the eagle was going away was because of certain insecticides, organochlorine pesticides, and we recognized that, and we said that wasn't okay. And so FIFRA was passed, the Federal Insecticide and Fungicide Reduction Act, and it banned certain classes of insecticides because we knew the harm that they were doing. And so, striped bass, rockfish in the Chesapeake Bay were significantly depleted. And that's a fisheries management success story, right? Because we recognized the problem. We collectively decided that this was not okay. The ozone layer, right? We recognized that and said, chlorofluorocarbon, CFCs are the cause of this depleted ozone. And so let's get rid of those. And the ozone's starting to heal itself. Same thing, similarly with acid rain in a large extent, where we saw this pretty significant problem. And while acid rain isn't gone yet completely, it's certainly improving because of changed air pollution regulations, right? We were putting nitric oxide out into the atmosphere, and that was turning into nitric acid and raining down and leaching aluminum out of the soils and killing trees and fish. So we've got some examples of successes, but we've got some really big looming problems ahead of us. And Ted, you're at the forefront of that. Can you comment on, the work that you're doing on like the combined sewer overflows in Harrisburg and, your landfill work? You told those stories really beautifully. So I guess my point is the battle's not over, but I think we're seeing some victories.
I'll say this, clean water, it's not a partisan issue. It should not be politicized. We need to see investments made for clean water. We need to see the political will of our lawmakers take an interest in our water. We are seeing a lot coming down the pike right now as far as funding goes. We're seeing a lot of groups out there. They're planting trees, they're planting buffers, streams are being restored. And I think we've done a lot over the last century plus in deforestation, clear cutting, development, land use decisions, state and federal agencies being lax on enforcement, not reissuing permits timely. Polluters are using expired permits and old technology-based standards and water quality based effluent limitations that are outdated. So we have to see that our state departments, our federal departments are fully funded. We need to restore their funding. We need to see legislators pay attention to these issues, especially with Harrisburg. I mean, that's just a poster child for how the state is not paying attention to the issues of water quality when they're not paying stormwater fees that are being issued to them to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. But, I think at the end of the day, water quality is getting better, and it will continue to get better as long as we see the investments from both the public sector, the private sector, and then again, having those boots on the ground. There's groups like the Conservancy, there's groups like the Alliance for the Bay, the Master Watershed Stewards, Riverkeeper, whoever. There's so many groups out here that are just doing tremendous work, and we're going to see it start to count here pretty soon. We're not going to meet 2025 Bay goals and deadlines. I mean, it's been established. That's unfortunate, but we will attain water quality standards over time. But again, we need to see the folks at the top care just as much as we all do here in this room, because they have the purse strings and they have to pass the budgets that are going to be put towards the environment and clean water. So again, it's up to us too, to pressure our legislators and our lawmakers and our state departments and the federal government to do more.
Yeah. And that you're exactly right. And that political will starts with awareness. And so, Jeremy, thanks for all your work in that. And if folks want to learn more about Freshwaters Illustrated, check out freshwaterillustrated.org. They've got really great memberships there. They've got films that are free to view. They've got some films that you get after you become a member. They've got a whole catalog of educational resources related to their films. They're excellent teaching resources for classroom teachers, if we have any classroom teachers in the audience. And you'll be able to see one of Jeremy's most recent films, Hidden Rivers, all about the amazing life of the southeastern U.S. on June 6th. It's a New Main Theater and Effort. And Ted's actually going to be one of our panelists for that movie too. So that'll be kind of cool. And definitely get out and support the Riverkeeper. These are both membership supported organizations. Freshwaters Illustrated and Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper depend on individual memberships as their lifeblood. And so, get out there and support both groups. Get out there and volunteer with Ted, show him some love. Same thing with Jeremy, right? It's kind of hard for us to volunteer with Jeremy all the way from Pennsylvania to Corvallis, but if you join FI, you get these beautiful prints. You know that you're supporting this much larger nationwide effort in raising awareness. And then, the Conservancy is here too, right? We depend on memberships as well. We've got a volunteer corps. We all work together as conservation organizations in the region to accomplish the same goals of clean air, clean water, and a livable community for our community members. And so, Ted, Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time for talking about your perspectives on the state of our rivers. It's certainly, on the days where I feel like not being super optimistic, it's a frightening prospect. But on the days where I feel like, letting a little bit of optimism in, largely because of your work, I see some real great progress being made. And, we just need everybody here to chip in and do their part. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Remember, our next Nature Hour is March 8th, and that's all going to be about spring ephemeral wildflowers. We've got these amazing wildflowers that have this really impressive life history that they figure out how to pack a lot of living into about a month's worth of time. And we're going to talk a little bit about them on March 8th. We have a whole bunch of other interpretive events coming up. Check out the Conservancy website under events to learn more about those. Thanks again, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.